Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome once again to the Meat and Potato Show, Conservative Talk and Awesome Rock. And we are filming here at our Ambush Studios here in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I want to welcome my great guest, Rob Antonellis, from Saving America the Beautiful, or savingatv.com. He's written a whole bunch of stuff. You can go to that site, savingatv.com, to talk about the culture war. And my great guest this evening supposedly has cracked the culture war. Rob, thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much.
Very good, very good. Hey, so obviously tell us about you. Tell us about, how you got started on this, and give us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've been digging into the trials and tribulations of the progressive movement and the liberal end of the world for quite a long time. I think since Bill Clinton got involved. And,
yeah.
And most particularly, I got aggressively started as of Easter time, and I actually thought that I was going to make a website which was going to have a powerful impact on America by revealing what I call the real Iron Curtain. And that's track number 4 on my audio. And as I delved and did some research, and I wasn't intending to do this, but I just happened, there's a couple of sequences we could talk about one day when we're having a beer, in my life that eventually got me into a position where I realized I cracked the culture war. I found the essence, the heart of it, and it was so shocking, and it's a lot to go into. We might touch on that today.
Sure, well, touch on it, yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I'll just keep it simple.
Sure.
To the point, it's a counter-American revolution, that we have one natural enemy in the United States. So even the enemies that we think of as our real enemies, we could list them, they're not real because they've been fabricated, usually paid for with American money. And American political might.
Right.
The one natural enemy that I believe that we have in this country is King George III. And it sounds shocking, but we once belonged to him. And after he was utterly and absolutely crushed militarily, in particularly the War of 1812, on 2 separate occasions,
sure,
that I believe, as king, he asked his court, which was unanimous in saying he was always right. And when he said that those colonies belong to me, they agreed. And he didn't drop, just because there was peace, supposedly, he did not stop his aggression towards the United States. He converted, he went from a covert war, which is black powder based. If you look at the War of 1812, there was, it was September 11th, by the way. It was on September 11th, and I have several other cases where they attacked us on that very special day. But it was that war that was the best example of all that demonstrated the inaccuracies of black powder, because they had 19 warships that came down to basically take over Baltimore, which is the second largest city at that time, and they launched as many as 1,800 bombs and missiles,
sure,
and you name it.
That's right.
And most of them were duds or they missed. And it was very expensive, and he lost. But then when he was absolutely crushed in New Orleans, that was the death knell for him trying to destroy America using black powder, because he killed with a bang, which he couldn't afford the publicity. It cost a lot of money, and it was very inaccurate. And I know, I've done my research, and I've become a little bit of a historian, to be honest. Learning about
this kind of happens when you start delving into things like this.
It's amazing, and it's also simple. The confluence of that agenda that I described, that he was going to continue fighting, and the Opium War, the China opium trade, which is an absolute misnomer, just as the culture war is a misnomer. The China opium trade was started by the British in China at gunpoint, and they used guns and opium to enslave people, to make more opium, to bring it. So it was the China East India Company that was, so it should have been called the British opium trade. And it was the confluence of that, the anger, the hatred of American constitutional government,
yes,
plus the incredible power of opium that allows me to say he switched. What he did was he just switched from
overt to covert.
He went overt to covert, black powder to white powder. Why? The white powder never misses its target, kills with a whimper.
Yeah, it's very exacting, right? I see where you're going,
and it's
right?
self-funding.
Right.
You see,
It's self-funding, that's right,
It's been going
it
on
is.
for hundreds of years, and I believe it has
That's
gone on for.
absolutely correct.
And that is what I say is the essence of the culture war. But you have to add in Fortress Harbor, which I see have displayed there.
Right. One of the things I wanted to say there, let's segue into that, and it's up on the site, again, savingatb.com. Fortress Harvard was tasked with creating a doctrine to convert the domestic population into agents of a foreign enemy. And let me stop there because that piece actually struck me. There's a little known fact in American history. We had talked off mic about this. Post-revolution, the American Revolution, obviously we were getting the country together. The Articles of Confederation failed, so we wrote the Constitution. But one of the things that had existed before and continued to exist after the war were our higher educational institutions, Princeton, Harvard, there were a few others. What had existed before was the professors that were at these colleges. This is an historical fact. The professors at these colleges were all foreign-born or vis-a-vis raised, trained, educated in old world politics. In other words, they came from the old world, so everything they were teaching was old world scientific methods, social methods, learning methods. And after the revolution, the United States was woefully lacking in American-born, American-made professors at these colleges. The foreign professors that were there had absolutely no concept of sovereignty, the individual, our Constitution, they could have cared less, or this entire concept of Americanism. And so this piece that you wrote in there struck me, and that's what I thought about. So almost from the start of the birth of our nation, foreign invaders, I shouldn't say invaders, but foreigners or people of foreign descent, or even just, I guess we could call it, well, they called it liberalism back in the day, but it was real classical liberalism. I guess basically what I'm trying to say is even from the beginning, there was always somebody in a level of higher education already teaching our young some sort of subversion. Am I wrong on that?
No, you're absolutely right, and I will go one step further. I'll tell you a quick diversionary side, and that was early this year. Before I started this project, I did a little bit of driving for Uber. I was just thinking this fun, and I thought, well, let's see how much money I can make with that. And the rates were actually pretty high when the snow was still. And so I'm driving this.
The rates were high when the snow was deep, right?
Yes. So I'm driving.
Wow, how did that work out?
A lot of Harvard kids take Uber. So I'm driving back this car, Harvard kids to drop them off on the Harvard campus. And I had already started to have these big suspicions about the British involvement in the creation of the culture war. So I'm driving across the street in Cambridge, and I'm looking at these houses, thinking these houses are just beautiful, and wow, I've never seen
Yeah,
this.
the Tory Row up there
Exactly,
in Boston,
and,
right?
Exactly, and that was what I later realized was Brattle Street.
Mm-hmm.
The homes are opulent, palatial. And then I saw a sign. I came back a few days later to look at it on a sunny day, and I saw at the corner of the street, there was a sign that said, up until the Revolution, this was known as Tory Row. Because at that time, a lot of families, wealthy families loyal to the crown, lived here. So then I'm thinking, because I'm always a little bit of a devil's advocate. So what happened after the Revolution? Did they just move back to England?
No, they stayed.
Yes.
Of course they did.
That's right.
I mean, what were they going to do, really? Seriously.
Well, exactly. They stayed, and did they stay loyal? So what I discovered was...
No.
Well, exactly. So they didn't stay loyal to the king publicly. But what I'm suggesting is that their proximity to the boathouse, really the boathouse where John F. Kennedy used to crew, logistically is ideal to move a large amount of opium into Cambridge.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in New England, Boston's the heart of New England, and Boston is much closer to real England than New York City, especially then.
Certainly.
There was no Cape Cod Canal. It's very dangerous getting around, the Cape. So it's much more easy for England to ship anything, tea, or anything.
Anything.
White powder.
Direct into Boston Harbor.
To Boston Harbor, and then you take a barge up the Charles River, and you got to take it to a safe haven, right? And what could be safer than a loyalist who has a huge, basically a palace in those days,
Sure.
with a large stable house, etc. And you go by carriage. The boxes might be labeled as tea. Who knows? And I believe that was the entry point into Harvard. And by the way, Harvard was built on a British land grant.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe those huge buildings, a lot of it is show. It gives the appearance of higher education. And that's why I call it the hollowed halls of Harvard. You know, hollow of anything that represents God or country.
Certainly.
And I believe it was the bulwark of King George III, because this goes back to the early 1800s, against the constitutional form of government.
What was the very first thing? Think back. You'd said you've been thinking about this for 20 years, but what was that spark? What was the thing that made you think to yourself, I've got to do something, I've got to start looking into this? What was that
Okay.
thing
All
that
right,
happened?
here's the thing. The thing that I believe was the essential element, all I needed to do was get the real Iron Curtain. You know, then I discovered, believe me, as I dug in, I discovered the real Iron Curtain is fabricated at Fortress Harbor. It's a vehicle. But the essence was, because we didn't have a chance to introduce myself, my background is industrial engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and I've done most of my career as a software engineer. So I like to debug things, but I'm also a big fan of process. When it comes to conspiracies, you know, I've been studying lots and lots of conspiracies. I know a lot of really brilliant conspiracy theorists, and they are brilliant, but a lot of them, they just spend a lot of their time digging, and all they do is they find conspiracies that take longer and longer and longer to explain. Nobody's got time to listen.
And it extrapolates into another conspiracy.
Well, it's all.
Whereas I prefer, Alex Jones does a good job of this. I've seen a few others. Whereas they cohese it together. They take the various things that you see as this conspiracy, that conspiracy, and that conspiracy, but they tie it all together. We had a great guest on the show a few months back. Patrick Wood wrote the book Technocracy Rising about the technocrats from the 20s and the 30s, and he absolutely great the way he tied everything in and linked it to the Council of Foreign Relations and the Bilderberger groups, and to this modern thing that we call liberalism today, which is destroying the country. Go on, I'm sorry.
No, you're exactly right. And what I have done, instead of tying it together, well, actually, I do tie it all together. When I say the culture war cracked, I really cracked the whole thing. It's unbelievable. But what I have had a passion for are the conspiracies that you can explain to somebody in a very short amount of time. So I realized on the way over here, there's really three attributes that I've kind of optimized on. So that's my industrial engineering background. Like speed of communicating it, like one sentence. Right? How about that? How about quickness to confirm it, but through a Google search?
Mm-hmm.
And then third is absolute shock value. Things that can actually make people's lives, people's political careers just evaporate.
Interesting.
And I've got two big ones that I have on my blog.
Go ahead, keep going, yeah.
Two huge ones on my blog, so you just go to savingatb.com/blog. And the biggest one, well, there's two huge ones. John McCain was listed by the U.S. military to be executed at the end of the Vietnam War.
I didn't know that.
No, nobody knows that. It's been disguised. In fact, Veterans Today has an awesome article. It came out within about a week of the dust-up between Donald Trump and John McCain.
Mm-hmm.
And if you remember, the media and the government, they were cloaking him in heroism because he's a POW. Of course, POWs are heroes. Of course they are.
Mm-hmm.
But he's different. Not only was his father an admiral, not only was he, I had always thought, up until that article, I had thought his greatest failure was that he's either grossly incompetent because of the tragedy on the USS Forrestal. I don't know if you know about that.
I remember that, yeah. He was part of the accident that happened there, the explosion and all. Right, that's right,
Yeah.
he was.
He dropped his bomb load. Where's that? I talked to a Navy guy a few weeks ago. I'm like, where in the Navy manual, because he was working as a pilot, it does say that you should drop your bomb load in your own aircraft carrier. So, and so then in hindsight, when I saw this article, I thought, you know what, he was probably being treasonous even then. And I think there should be a new investigation opened by the United States Navy to say maybe the USS, because it was the greatest aircraft air carrier.
Right, it was
incident.
considered an accident. I remember that.
Exactly,
Yeah.
it was classic, right? But it cost $500 million in damage in today's dollars.
Yeah, people
Not
died.
counting-
People
there's
were
like
burned
300
horribly,
people.
right?
Yes, 130 or 40 people were killed. But,
Yeah.
so let's get to the essence of the article. If you Google the terms Hanoi John McCain,
Mhm.
can of worms,
Interesting.
you will see an article from, what's it called, veteranstoday.com. And that came out 1 week after the Donald Trump dust-up with John McCain. And in it, it describes something horrifying. And it's the kind of information that if this got slightly public, he would melt. He would just disintegrate.
Mhm.
He would have to hide. He would have to be afraid that people would say, well, you know what, let's open up those documents. So but what he did, while a prisoner of war, is he made over 30 radio broadcasts to give aid and comfort to the enemy.
Mhm.
That means Viet Cong, that means the North Vietnamese Army, North Vietnamese Air Force, and that's horrific. But even worse, he gave vital, top secret flight pattern information that Navy pilots are trained and trained and trained so that when they're under high stress, they do it.
Like, sure.
And they all behave like a flight, and like a team. And he gave this information which is virtually impossible for the enemy to ever elicit because they have all these random events. They have some, they can't get this information, but they got it all from John McCain.
Certainly.
And potentially there were 60 aircraft that were down. as a
Shot
result.
down as a result of
So that's John McCain. He was pardoned by Nixon, with 32 others that were on this list of 33 to be executed. So that
Certainly,
right there,
that's interesting.
see, that I think is, if that could become breaking news, the whole, I think it's like you pop the zip, and I really believe the whole New World Order will just come right through, and we can just pull it like this. That's one. My belief was that, and I didn't know this piece of it at the time. All I knew was about the treason,
Mhm.
the USS Forrestal. The bigger one that I'm about to tell you about, I did know about for quite some time.
Certainly.
And this involves Mitt Romney.
Go ahead.
And if you go to my blog, which is savingatv.com/blog, you'll see one that's entitled, it's short, very short, it's a couple paragraphs, but the title of it is Mitt Romney Taught 9/11 Theology.
Really?
Yes.
And where did he do this? What's
Well, okay. He had a D4 ministerial deferment to France during the Vietnam War. So he was teaching Mormonism. You see, Mormonism is a synthetic religion.
I know it is. Right.
And there's a chapter 9, verse 11 in the Book of Mormon. And they used it, so I'll just read you one sentence from it. I did send down fire to destroy them, that their wickedness and abominations might be hid from before my face. And I consider that to be Mormon jihad.
Interesting.
I consider it to be an English version of the Quran. And I think Mormonism is in fact the crystalline structure for today's radical Islam. I think it's the same thing. Multiple wives, abuse them, just have children, the ends justify the means, destroy Christianity because that's what, so they're a synthetic religion, and what they are, according to Anton Chaikin. Anton Chaikin was a co-author for this book called The Unauthorized Biography of George Bush. And he does a lot of work with progressive media, I think it's called, that's owned by Lynn LaRouche. And he had a book on Mormonism, and so I quoted him, I sort of had a quote from him about Mormonism and what they do on campuses is they get these ambassadors that they're going to send overseas to be an ambassador for the religion, but they're actually CIA and MI6.
Sure.
And they have no interest, don't think that they're helping us, because they're not.
No, they're not.
So this thinking was what I was hoping would be something relevant to what I would reveal, because there was a 9/11 attack. You see, that's what I call the real ground zero. September 11th, 1857, Mountain Meadow Massacre. So these are things that all you can just Google. Like it was September 11th, 1857. It was 144 years prior to the World Trade Center attack.
Certainly, right.
And so 144, a dozen, it's gross, it's grotesque as well. And so that's what he was teaching when he was over in France, teaching theology. That's what they do. I mean, they teach from the Book of Mormon, and you can't teach the Book of Mormon without teaching 911. So I was absolutely confident.
This is true. That's
correct
right.
when I said he taught 9/11 theology, and so did the other guy, Harry Reid, Mormon minister.
Mm-hmm.
So here you have guys that they taught 9/11 theology. How could they not have been celebrating the day of those times?
Well, even Harry Reid at this point in time, I think it's a combination of his old age and just the fact that the guy's just an asshole. Just to be, I mean, you look at the way he behaves in the Senate, the way he just blocks things just because he has the power. And this whole story about him supposedly falling off a treadmill, I don't believe that, when he got his whole face beaten up. There's all sorts of stuff all over the web that mobsters actually visited him and beat him up because of something that was going on in Nevada that he was putting the kibosh on, and they wanted it done. And yes, and a U.S. senator was beaten up by the mob, and somebody like Harry Reid was. So the fact that he fell off a treadmill. Look for the medical history. Look for was he led into the hospital? What was the story? Well, again, you got to do your homework to to find out the actual truth. But
no, you're right. But the way I look at that event, the Mountain Meadow Massacre, 144 years before the World Trade Center Tower disaster,
mm-hmm.
and the fact that both of them are Mormon and both of them are ministers, and both can be, essentially accused of teaching 9/11 theology, is a reason why he should be nowhere near a microphone, and he certainly should be nowhere near anyone's gun rights. I mean, I called the Mountain Meadow Massacre for at least like 8 years. I've considered it personally to be Harry Reid, is gun control Harry Reid style.
Why do these people do this? It's a question I asked Patrick Wood when he was on the show a couple of times talking about his book Technocracy Rising. Why? And I'm not looking at, well, they're connected to the Bilderberg. Well, they're connected to the New World Order. I'm looking for the higher why are they doing this? And is it just pure evil? Is that what it is? I mean, what's the bigger why?
Okay, I'll tell you why. See, I didn't have a chance, and on my audio I didn't connect these two cults, Skull and Bones and the Mormons, specifically to the British. Because you can see the 9/11 fascination. Book of Mormon, 1830. Skull and Bones, 1832. But I showed you the date of the attack on Fort McHenry was September 11th, 1814.
Mm-hmm.
Predated by at least 16 years. And I discovered, just watching the Military History Channel, I discovered there's the other attacks on American soil by the British on that date, September 11th. Two other significant dates. One was the Battle of Brandywine, September 11th, 1777.
This is true.
They were about to take Philadelphia, which is the capital.
That's right.
They
Battle
successfully
of
took
Brandywine.
Philadelphia on that date. So it's an important date for them. And then the final battle of the Revolutionary War was September 11th, 1782, in Fort Henry, which is in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think they're 2 feet by half, because look, September 11th, Fort Henry, and then the next war, which was the War of 1812, that all these historians say is unrelated. It's more related to the Napoleonic Wars and has nothing to do with any kind of, and I think maybe they're wrong. Because look, September 11th, 1782, Fort Henry. September 11th, 1814, Fort McHenry.
Mm-hmm.
So that to me sounds like 2 cute by half. And what I detect is that these people, because my specialty really has become pattern matching. With engineering, I really, in software development.
So you can see the patterns.
That's all you do is you pattern match. When you code to best practices. That's just what I do all day long for decades. So that looks like a pattern of 2 cute by half. I got another example of that later if we have time. But so there's a September 11th fascination for killing Americans, and that there's 3 examples of the British killing Americans, and I think the first covert one was when their entities, the cults that they formed, were the ones doing the murdering of Americans.
Do you think that 9/11 was British based? British somehow because we hear conspiracy theories that it does have something to do with the New World Order. I'm of the belief, I have very close relatives who not only worked at World Trade, but were there that day. And one of my nephews actually got off the train early for work and decided to go down the street a couple of blocks to a Dunkin' Donuts and get some coffees when the first plane hit. So it's a little tough for me to see the deeper picture behind the conspiracy. But is it just too convenient to default towards the terrorists, or were they just lackeys? Were they just patsies of a larger plan?
Well, the larger plan that my research has brought me to, because I've become friends with the LaRouche campaign.
Right.
LaRouche, and
I'm gonna ask you about that.
And I got a very fascinating email and very in depth about the Saudi connection. The Saudis and they're both royalty, by the way.
Of course they are,
and
right.
The king
I
of
understand
Saudi
that
Arabia
connection,
likes
right.
to behead people, by the way. And there's a strong connection to the British Royal Crown, which is the BRC, I call it the Bloody Royal Crown. And there was a fascinating covert operation that was started like in 1989.
Right. For a little historical fact, most Saudi money, oil money, they don't have it in, a Saudi bank. No, they run it through Lords of London. They run it through the big banks that are in London, England. This is a fact. Go ahead.
So what I have discovered is that starting in the late 80s, there was a plan, a deal, made by the former British Aerospace, which reorganized itself under the name BAE. And the deal was they needed to sell advanced weaponry and avionics to the king. And the king was willing
Saudi Arabian king.
Yes, Saudi Arabian king was willing to, instead of paying cash, instead of having something traceable apparently, he gave each day an oil tanker full of oil to BAE.
Sure, to fuel.
And it was a slush fund. It was a way for them to pay for their avionics. I think he overpaid, but the point is he paid for the avionics that he got, plus he gave them a slush fund.
Mm-hmm.
And that slush fund enabled him to do incredibly vast technological things, including crack our entire air traffic controlling system and replicate it so that it can be penetrated.
Do you think that the influx of Muslims in the UK is a side payback too? That there was possibly even a side agreement that, well, oh, by the way, you need to take all these refugees. And here's the thing. I mean, you hear about how there's plenty of room in Saudi Arabia to take the refugees. They have the money to take care of the refugees, but they don't. They slough them off to the European countries and slough them off to us. And then, of course, we all know what they're up to. We know that that's part of the whole caliphate, to infiltrate other countries. Do you think that's like part of like another side deal? Okay, you gave us the avionics, we gave you the oil. Oh, by the way,
it's possible, but I suspect that it's much more malicious than we think. I think that they want them in England so they can be trained in the art of mass murder, and it all comes back to the husband of the Queen of England. Don't think that a queen is any more compassionate than a king. The husband is Prince Philip.
I know.
And in 1989, he launched the Sacred Lands Project. And the Sacred Lands Project basically said all religions of the world should basically admit that Mother Earth is the ultimate, God.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, England is a sacred land. And oh yes, and the population of the Earth should be 1 billion. So back then, the population of the Earth was 4.5 billion.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean, Prince?
Depopulation.
3.5 billion, too many people? How do you get rid of 3.5 billion?
It's interesting too. Every time I hear this concept of depopulation, I think of the book Nature's End by Whitley Strieber and James Kunetka, which I've read several times, and it's basically a science fiction book. And it talks about several things that are going on now today. This false notion of global warming and climate change, and an overpopulation of the planet and a penchant of the world body, they call it the world body, we call it the world government, to depopulate the entire planet. Sorry about that. I'm just filling in a few facts.
No, you really have said yes.
That's exactly it. Let's move on. Let's switch gears a little bit. There's another thing here. Let's move on to economics. And again, one of the things that, and my great guest, Rob Antonellis, has mentioned the LaRouche campaign. I've had the pleasure of speaking to Keisha Rogers, who was running for Congress and for Senate out in Texas, and Rachel Brown, who was running for Congress here in Massachusetts against Barney Frank back in the day. I spoke to one of the campaign managers. His name slips my mind at this time, out in Los Angeles. This was a long time ago when I was back on WCW radio. And so the LaRouche people I'm very familiar with. I've had them on my show several times. I look forward to having them on. Next year is a great election season, and I look forward to talking to these people again. But one of the things I want to talk to Rob about is that the government has their fingers in everyone's pie. They have their fingers in our businesses, and they have their fingers in our tax policy, and they manipulate the banks, they manipulate currency. We can all go into Glass-Steagall and all that other stuff. That's another conversation for another day. I'm basically trying to paraphrase and cover a few subjects here. There's a great piece, again, on his site, savingatb.com. Rob Antonellis wrote this. One modern example is Professor Warren. Crafting a message that echoed from the tallest soapbox in the world was her battle cry: if you own a business, you didn't do that, somebody else did. I remember Elizabeth Warren saying that. I also remember President Obama echoing that. Now, to a certain degree, if you take what she said there in its strictest form, to a certain degree, there is a modicum of truth. Yes, other people built the roads. Yes, other people put up the phone lines. Yes, other people did all this other stuff. I understand that. But these are all private businesses, and even though some of them are government and private business partnerships that go on, and always be careful of that word, government and private partnerships. It's a ruse. It's a Rube Goldberg ruse there. However, it always comes down to the individual coming up with an idea and deciding to do this. What I have right here. Okay, yes, somebody else built the TV, somebody else built the turntable, the soundboard, the stuff, the wires, everything else. I understand that. But I built this business. I built this radio show, and I did it all by myself, quite literally, out of thin air. I came up with the idea, and I decided to do it. This is American entrepreneurship. This is American enterprise. This is something that has fueled this country for 200 plus years. It is government's penchant, not their job. It's weird. Robert Hanan, who's and you're gonna sneer at me. He's a British parliamentarian. He wrote in a great article that it is a Western phenomenon to regulate everything. And what we see here now is the government getting their fingers in everyone's pie. And it's a total control for anybody who wants to come up with an idea. You can't start a business unless you have tens of thousands of dollars already saved just to go through the permitting and hurdle process to get off the ground. And I want Rob to talk about what Professor Warren said. And he goes on to say, understand why Harvard alumni Obama loves her and repeated her hate. This is one example of a time-tested pattern. And it is. It's a pattern that keeps going on and on and on. We always talk about something that needs to be regulated. There was just another thing the other day. It was in the news. Drones are becoming the Christmas toy of the year. And I don't mean the big drones that you see the government flying. No, just people go around flying the drones. Everybody's had remote control stuff, remote control cars, boats, planes, everything. There's a whole genre of people out there that like to play with those things. Already the government is thinking of a way to regulate that. And I want you to take it from there.
Well, when it comes to if you own a business, you didn't do that, somebody else did. That fits exactly the pattern that I'm describing as I talk about the real Iron Curtain, which is established at Fortress Harvard, I believe, and the echo chamber, which is functions when she has a message that other people repeat it until eventually it comes out.
Right, it keeps coming out, right, until everybody starts believing that, right.
Right, this one, I believe, laid the groundwork for this white privilege, and I think that's what she was doing. She was laying the groundwork for white privilege argument, because here it is, it just popped up, and then I believe the pattern is quite interesting because I can prove to you that it's kind of suspicious when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
And this one's kind of shocking because, like I said, I kind of feel like I'm an expert in pattern matching, and the pattern is there. And patterns become undeniable, and that's what the money trail is.
Certainly.
The money trail is a pattern. So when you look at the pattern,
I want to stop you there. Also, another great catchphrase is millionaires and billionaires. They always keep using that. You didn't build that. Millionaires and billionaires. We're looking at Bernie Sanders, the top 1%. They talk about climate change. Just the four things I mentioned right there are all connected in there, and it does. It starts that pattern. It eventually leads into the Black Lives Matter, to where basically everything American, everything that's white, everything that's male, everything that is entrepreneur or sovereign, and understand the word I'm using when I say sovereign. I mean you, yourself, the way you are, the way you think, you're a sovereign individual. Under this pattern, the collectivist pattern, that can apply. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
right. So some pattern that's very interesting that started in Fortress Harvard, just like this one, this example here. It was her idea.
Yeah.
It was her comment. She was out there in Western Massachusetts, screeching about this.
I remember that
and then
too, right?
Bounced around, next thing you know, the president's saying. So it fits the pattern of grounded at Fortress Harvard, bounces around through various places in the media, and then is broadcast from the loudest mouthpiece in the world. And then that's when something that hit me between the eyes, and that's the origins of the Black Lives Matter movement. Could be argued to have been when Barack Hussein Obama came out 6 months into his presidency and accused the Cambridge police of being foolish.
Stupid, right?
So there you go.
The Gates issue, right?
So let's just debug that. Here's him standing on the tallest soapbox in the world with this message. Did it start there? See, I can explain to you how it's very possible. It's plausible. I'm not saying it's the truth, but the guy, the professor, Henry Gates, was in China.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes home, he gets locked out of his house.
Right.
And then somebody calls 911, next thing you know, he's in his house, comfortably. And then the police show up and he attacks them. And to me, it just doesn't feel genuine. Because it fits the pattern.
Yeah, it doesn't.
The pattern is that he knew before he was coming back from China, because he had a conversation. Someone had even tried to break into his house several months prior.
Certainly.
So it just fits the pattern. I'm not saying it's true, but it fits the pattern perfectly. 6 months into Obama's presidency, this woman who has had at least strong aspirations to run for president and may have cooked something up. It's in other words a sting operation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a sting of the Cambridge police, and if he did this sting, she was involved.
And here's the other thing. Where's the 911 call? Where are those transcripts? Who was the person? Who was the person that did it? That's that. And in fact, track the number. And never mind giving a name. Just track the number. Where did the number come from? Who made that phone call? Also, let me make another point. If you live in this neighborhood, you must know some of your neighbors, especially if you live there however long Gates has lived there. I've only been in this house since March. I already know all my neighbors. They know my kids. They know my comings and goings because I interact with my neighbors. So it doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't.
And again, I'm sorry, but let's say something like that does happen. And you're in your house and you're making a cup of coffee or whatever. It's like, God damn, I got locked out of my house. It's like I had to crawl through the window. Jeez, what the hell did I do with my keys? Suddenly there's a knock on the door and the police are there. You calmly explain. It's like, oh no, I live here. I got locked out of my house. I had to. No, I live here. Yeah, I'll show you my ID. Yeah, this is where I live. And it's like, all right, Mr. Gates, have a good day. See you later. That's what would normally transpire.
Exactly.
But you're saying immediately it just boom went instant confrontational.
Yes, like he was expecting it to be, like he wanted it to be. So there's something.
Exactly
There's
right.
something in that's not even in my. You're going to get something that's so hot. It's not even in Culture War Crack. That's the name of the.
Sure, right.
The series of recordings, and actually the second track is called Culture War Crack.
Yeah, we got stuff on PDF here. There are all tapes. Everything will be put up on the YouTube channel. There's links on the Facebook page already. So we'll give all that stuff later on as we go along. Go ahead.
But what my background is, I said industrial engineering, software developer. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been starting businesses all my life, and I have discovered I have an invention that will get Professor Henry Gates on a polygraph test.
Interesting.
And once we do that, and here's the invention. It's called the Truth Matrix. It's really a fascinating idea. Maybe I'll do it for my company, or with my company. The idea is, it works a little bit like a raffle. So the idea will be if somebody believes, you know what, I always thought that thing smelled like a rat. I don't buy it. I'd give $50. I'd give $100. If you can get this guy on a polygraph test. Wow. And then it becomes like, you have to have a legitimate corporation that's managing the money. The bank account is published. People see
Certainly.
it. And then the money builds. And then what it can have multi-purpose, you see. If somebody has evidence, maybe the driver wasn't involved, but he had high suspicions, and he says, well, I felt really weird about that, and now there's $500,000, and it's like an award money. And I'm
To
gonna
come forward. I see where you're going,
with
right.
the data. I'm going to come forward with the information to get, and if he gets a conviction, I get $500,000. So, but you got to have yin and yang. You got to have like two offsetting, because what if he's totally innocent? You can't just, there might be some false accusations, and that'll be discarded. But the point is, the thing that keeps it interesting and gets people to keep putting money in is they say, well, he has the right to also say, I'll take a polygraph test, I'll prove to you that when I came back from China, I had no idea I was going to be locked out of my own house. You guys are crazy, and thank you very much, because I'm going to take a polygraph test. I'm going to prove you guys wrong. I get the $500,000, or maybe it's up to $1 million.
Sure, right.
So then the question is, if he doesn't take the polygraph, and it is up to $1 million, does he not need $1 million?
Sure, right. If he can prove it, right. If he can prove he had nothing to do with it, fine. I'll give him the money.
Exactly.
So he exonerates himself and gets a reward for doing so.
Exactly. But since he
That's
doesn't
a great
do
idea,
it,
actually.
then why doesn't
I
he
like
do it?
that idea.
Because maybe he's guilty.
And we could apply it to other things. Let's look at the Baltimore thing, the hands up thing,
Oh, God.
the Ferguson stuff, all of that stuff. Do the same thing.
I got some information about my opinion about those very special words that the mayor of Baltimore said. Give them space to destroy.
To destroy things.
It's a shocking statement, and I'm convinced.
That's
and
a dereliction of duty.
I don't know how I can prove this, but maybe the Truth Matrix would do this. It's called the Truth Matrix, by the way.
Anybody in any branch of office, whether it's federal all the way down to just your local person right here in your own city or town, they have to hold up their hand to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. They can the oath can be manipulated anyway to fit whatever parameters, but there is always the term protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. Those words are always in the oath, one way or the other. And the reason why it is always put into the oath is because it is sacrosanct. You cannot break that. Yet we see that all the time. We're going to give them space to destroy. Well, that's fine that you're doing that, but what about the people who are having their stuff destroyed? You took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. You have to protect the rights of the people having their stuff destroyed.
I believe she said that, and of course, after she said it, she got a lot of heat.
Sure.
For saying that. And I believe, if you remember, there was somebody that was sent from the White House that she had met with shortly beforehand. I'm convinced it was an uncoded message from the White House. you know, that Obama, being a community organizer, knowing what kind of effect he wanted to have on the police department, to create this vacuum, that it literally could have come from the White House, but it wasn't supposed to be spoken. In other words, it was supposed to be dressed up like, oh, there's a lot of pain in that city, a lot of people suffering.
The city is Democrat run. It's been Democrat. It's like Detroit. It's been Democrat run since the 60s.
Yes.
How's that working out for you, Detroit? How's that working out for you, Baltimore? You know, it's interesting you said that about the police. We're working on a dichotomy here. In the John Birch Society magazine, The New American, I have a subscription to that. There was a great issue a few months back devoted to the militarization of our police around the country. And everybody sees it. The smallest town in America has MRAPs. They've got tanks. They've got SWAT gear. They've got military weaponry. The smallest town. Given to them freely by the government. There was just another article in last month's New American magazine about the police being under fire and the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and the efforts, as Rob just mentioned, of the Obama administration to defund the police, to hamstring the police, tie one arm behind their back. So we're working on a dichotomy here. One, we've got a militarized police, and on the other side, we've got an administration that is doing everything, kit and caboodle, to basically castrate them. And it's bizarre, but this is part of the whole mixed signal that liberals do. This is all part of the mixed signal that even just government, it doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. Our government has done this for a long, long, long time. I think one of the things I want to ask you, and it brings us into this next thing here, tide rising, but the methods appear to be conservative as insanity. Many consider liberalism to be a mental disorder. While it is, the actions they take are part of a much longer term plans to put America back into its rightful place in the eyes of the king, in the stockade or grave, paying for the heresy of the Tea Party and the audacity of those who signed the Constitution. So we see this, like you said, we're going to give them space to destroy stuff. You even see something like, even somebody like Rahm Emanuel, who runs Chicago. And I'm telling you folks, he got that job because of the people he knows, because he was part of the Obama administration. This is purposeful on their side.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Let me just quickly diverge
to
a conversation while I was down in New York City at the LaRouche meeting on November 14th. It was a Saturday.
Before you go on, you consider yourself a LaRouche Democrat? Have you?
Not so much. I mean,
How long have you been following them?
Just about half a year. I was getting some very good information from them that help this whole concept coalesce.
Certainly.
For example, I'll tell you how he started the meeting. He's down in Leesburg, Virginia at the time, and broadcasting to New York City. He started the meeting.
Lyndon's still alive?
He's still alive, he's 93.
Oh, good
He
Lord.
started the meeting by saying, ISIS is a British operation and Obama is a British agent. He said that.
It's possible.
So, that can certainly help answer when you say, like, why would Obama do this? Why would it's clearly anti-American. Like everything he does.
Right.
I haven't seen, he supposedly was a constitutional attorney. I haven't found one thing he's ever said or done in 7 years that's helped the Constitution. But let me just talk quickly about this.
Go ahead.
There's a point that there's something I'm 180 degrees opposed to what Michael Savage says. His claim to fame practically has been liberalism is a mental disorder. Liberalism is insanity. And all that does is it's the end of the road. When you are trying to solve the problem, and that's my big thing, solve problems. When you're trying to solve a problem and the opponent is found to be insane, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah.
And I have a whole different
I see where you're going,
I
right.
have a whole different attitude, because the reality is if you put 100 liberals into a room and say, come up with a plan that's going to really stick it to the Republicans, they'll come out and they will be consistent and they will watch each other's back. If they need to go back into that room and come up with a cover-up plan, they'll come up with one and they'll stick with it.
Certainly.
So there's no comparison to liberalism and a mental disorder at all. And my definition for liberalism, and you can kind of throw in progressivism into this too, it's mass murder in slow motion.
Certainly. There's another.
Let me repeat that. It's mass murder in slow motion.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It really is. Actually, another thing that liberalism professes and espouses and uses as a tool, they use consensus as science. The more people that you can get to believe, even if it is a complete, total lie, the more people that you can get to believe their mantra or their ideology or whatever it is, whatever the current flavor, political flavor is of the week, as many people as you can get in consensus, it then becomes science, it then becomes fact. I'm talking about the British psychiatrist R.D. Laing in 1964 wrote his book, The Politics of Experience. And he always uses the theory of there were 10 people in a room, and they're all told that the ceiling is blue. And they all look up, and the ceiling is clearly white. 9 of the people say, okay, well, we're told the ceiling is blue. The 9 of us have agreed that the ceiling is blue. The one person says, no, look, it's white. That person is instantly demonized. They're instantly demonized, shunted out, somehow. Now let's extrapolate it. Let's look at global warming and climate change. Look at all the scientists who say, oh, no, wait a minute, I don't think that's true. They're defunded, they're fired, they're thrown out of the scientific community because you dare to go against the consensus. Consensus, under liberalism, being a mental disorder, becomes science. It's a great tool that they harness and used quite effectively, as a matter of fact. Again,
Absolutely.
Look at Black Lives Matter, look at Baltimore, for how that whole mob mentality,
Yes.
get them all to believe this one thing, and off you go.
Absolutely. On my way to the Trump rally here in Worcester a week and a half ago, I, for whatever reason, had this eureka moment, and I realized, after a lot of research I've been doing and documented, I realized what politically correct speech was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I boil it down to 5 words, or maybe it's 5 or 6, I don't know. It's the king's dungeon turned inside out. If you think about a king's dungeon, you know, you would have maybe if you're lucky, you got a collar around your neck with a chain going to the wall, and that might be where you spend the rest of your life. But you can't put that many people in a dungeon, especially people far away. And what has become of academia, you know, this fraud. In fact, it was an absolute fraud. This use of Fortress Harvard, it's a fraud academia, and they cultivated this doctrine, and they constructed politically correct speech so that they can tether you, whether you're in your own home, at work, outside in the community.
Certainly.
You are there. And it all does root to one evil man that formed this counter-American revolution from Fortress Harvard, and that's why I believe that is.
Certainly, the more you put the pieces of the puzzle together and connect the dots, it really is. And I think the vastness of it and the extrapolation of it, and to a certain degree, the weird hit or miss, the way it appears to be coming out of nowhere, that's all part of the plan, to make it seem like it's coming out of nowhere, to
Yes.
make it seem like it's disconnected,
Yes.
but it really is connected. I want to move on a little bit. Obviously, you went to college. And what was your major?
Industrial engineering.
Okay, so it was industrial engineering, but still, you probably still had to take humanities, literature, other stuff, you know, in your first year or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you see even then the liberal bent from your professors? Never mind your industrial stuff, the scientific stuff you had to do. That's pretty much A, B, and C. But from the other classes that you had to take in order to get your credits, that kind of thing. Did you see that bent from your professors as well? That liberal bent?
It was beginning there. I was kind of confused. I mean, I'm right out of high school.
When'd you come out of college?
I graduated in '80, so I was high school in '80, so I was in UMass University.
Until about
from
84,
80 to
86, right.
So it was definitely beginning, and you know, you'd see things like you walk through a student union building, and there's people dressed up in uniforms laying dead on the ground, trying to highlight the word Nicaragua or whatever.
Sure, right.
So I saw the beginnings of it. Yes.
That's it. That's interesting because there's always been college protests. Colleges are always the bastion of all that stuff. And in my younger days, the colleges that I was in, I didn't go to college. I was always doing other things. I was always interacting with colleges because I had a lot of friends that were in college, and I happened to play in a band, so I was always at the frat parties and at the spring days and everything else. But the fact that I was there, I noticed that. I noticed that as even though I was in my 20s at the time, I mean, I was a burgeoning conservative even then. Because I would go to these places and I would see, and I would think to myself, this is just insane behavior. This is insane behavior that they're exhibiting. This is insane type of ideology that they're talking about. But I was too young and too inexperienced to understand where it was coming from. Now that I'm the ripe old age of 52 and I've done this show for a number of years and done all my research, now I do understand that. But all these people are now grown up, and they're in businesses, positions of power now. They are affecting change from within now.
Absolutely. Just to touch back on that comment I had about liberalism is mass murder in slow motion.
Yes.
Obamacare is that on steroids. It's mass murder without the fingerprints, because he can always claim, oh, I didn't know. But some shocking information about this list of 100,000 ways to die. They added 100,000 new ways to die.
Of course there are.
Well, that's what they added, 100,000 new ways to die. And when you hear the list, the one that is the most shocking, and that proves that it's a giant fraud, is death by flaming water skis. I heard that once, and I never heard it again, but that's okay. I don't forget that.
That's on the list.
Yes. And so what it really means is they had to come up with 100,000. That was the goal. And they were having drunken parties. They were having who knows what kind of orgies, whatever they were doing, just coming up with the craziest things they could, because they had to reach a certain threshold for how to die. And it's just outrageous. Because all it does is it just bogs down doctors' time. And it makes a bigger division between the doctor and the patient, because he's spending all the time looking at all these ways that you could have died. Like, no, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that.
Exactly. It just adds more to the bureaucracy. You know, European style public health, I'm going to call it. Although there are big waiting lists and they're already financially in the tank, France is a great example. I've spoken to many people, and I know some people who are living in France, Americans, and it quite literally, it's socialized medicine. Yes, I understand that, but it really is free medicine. I mean, you can go in at any time, any emergency, totally free. You don't have to worry about it. Unfortunately, whatever the model was that we were supposed to adopt is 180 degrees opposite of even the European model. I mean, once you got the American federal government involved in socialized medicine, it was bound to just turn into this gobbledygook. And I have to say, I completely agree with you. It's this complete evil. It's slow death is what it is. I mean, the government won't pay for things that... Let's look at LASIK surgery. This is a fact. LASIK surgery. I wear glasses. Rob wears glasses. We could go in, get LASIK surgery. Our eyes are fixed. No more glasses. 20 years from now, we might have to go get it again because we're getting older, and that's what happens. You have to pay for that out of your pocket. It's considered experimental. It's considered outside the general, realm of medical practice here in the United States. You go to France, you go to Sweden, oh, you don't need glasses. We'll just send you down to the LASIK center and get your eyes zapped. Boom, you get your eyes zapped. Sure, you got to wait 6 months, or maybe even a year before you can get in line, but they'll zap your eyes and boom, yep, the government will pay for it, and yep, there you go. Have a nice day. That's true socialized medicine. Here in the United States, it's really... It's not designed You know, when he said about 40 million Americans uninsured, you know, it's now up to about 50 million Americans uninsured because of all the people that got thrown off of their health care. So it's not this utopia that we were fed. It's slow death.
Exactly, and I often take exception with people like Rush Limbaugh, who really got people thinking, oh, I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to get European-style socialized medicine into America. I lived in Germany for 4 years, and they were definitely behind American. They wanted to take out my gallbladder. It would have been a week in the hospital. It would not have been anything like that in America. I didn't do it. I still have my gallbladder, luckily. But the point is, that was presented by Rush Limbaugh as like the worst they're going to try to do. They're going to try to get a European-style medical system in America. What we got is far worse. Obamacare is so far worse. And that's what I suggested about this 100,000 new ways to die. That is not something you do when you care about increasing the life expectancy, or when you want to give doctors more time spent with their patients. That's like, it's actually the exact opposite.
Right. And what's interesting is that prior to Obama, and you can look up the statistics, that the medical profession was one of the largest growing American industries prior to Obama. While at the same time a lot of our manufacturing was leaving, even cars, basically anything quote unquote made in America was going overseas to China. One of the largest growing sectors of the economy was healthcare. Two reasons. Baby boomers getting older, and just the scientific discoveries that were being made out there. And so there was a growing industry. Had Obama not gotten into office and Obamacare had never happened, the healthcare industry could have been the GM of the day. You know, and I say GM because GM was big back in the 40s and 50s. It could have been the big three automakers back in the 50s. It would have been the place to work, the future of American industry. But that was part of the plan. Again, we were talking about these things that are hit and miss that seem disconnected. That was part of the plan. Get hold of that, destroy that segment. I mean, destroy it before it even gets off the ground.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you got 15% of your economy, and when you throw a wet blanket on it, and then you wrap it up in a rope, and you start tightening it, you are then really having a significant impact on economic growth.
Certainly. So what's next for you? You've got this thing going.
Oh, I got a lot going on. I got a new product coming out.
Have you got a lot of hits on this site? Have you?
So far, I have not yet had much opportunity.
When did you actually produce this?
This has been mostly during the summer.
So this is new.
Oh, it's all brand new. I started to give out early copies, weeks ago, but I haven't yet really had the opportunity to really get ready to launch it. And that's what, maybe some of your viewers. Well, the point of this is the first track is called Thought Heard Around the World.
Yes.
What I would hope is that your listeners will begin to take it upon themselves to spread the word, because there's so much in this, in my recordings, that can utterly change even presidential politics. So, like, let's just talk about the Mountain Meadow Massacre, Romney and Reed teaching 9/11 theology. Look at the politicians that are currently vying for your money and to control your life, whose political futures might be evaporated. And one of them, of course, is Paul Ryan. If Mitt Romney goes down, and that's what this could do, if someone starts asking about the Mountain Meadow Massacre, and what do you think about Mountain Meadow Massacre, and did you teach 9/11 theology when you were in England, or Ireland, France, I mean? Did you Mormons do anything like celebratory? See, that's another thing, Donald Trump was talking about the celebrations in New Jersey on that day.
Which were a fact, folks, that actually happened.
So, if that's true, I know it's true, but what about the Mormons? They have a whole chapter, chapter 9, verse 11. And here's this, what I call the Mormon mosque in Belmont. I call it a mosque. Were they celebrating privately? Where was Mitt Romney on September 11th.
Certainly. Interesting. Interesting.
So in other words, I think there's some shocking things in there, and certainly when it comes to gun control, any gun control is going to have Harry Reid's dirty fingerprints on it. And, well, why don't we ask him if Mountain Meadow Massacre could best be described as gun control Harry Reid style? Just put your guns down, put the guns down, everything's going to be okay. And that's what they did. And eventually they put the guns down and they were all massacred.
Exactly. Yeah, the gun control. Exactly.
And then the other thing is John McCain. How many politicians will see their political futures evaporate if he is finally realized to be a traitor of epic proportions? John McCain and the Gang of Eight.
The Gang of Eight.
He's the linchpin. In fact, that's what I say on my blog, is that he is the linchpin of the Gang of Eight.
Sure.
It couldn't have happened, so any of the legislation they got through wouldn't have happened if it had been known. So anybody that's on the Gang of Eight, which is Marco Rubio. So there's political future, there's a cost for everything. And you've got another one, which is Fiorina. She's pretty close to McCain, from what I understand.
Interesting.
Oh, that's what I've heard. She's kind of like connected.
Interesting. What made you go to the Trump thing a week or so ago?
I like Donald Trump. I thought it was exciting. I like the way he brings things out into the public at great angst to the whole media, because that's.
I think it's amazing that the media, they don't even know what to do with themselves. So, well, what they're doing is they're defaulting to demonization. Remember what I said about the 10 people in a room saying that the 9 of them saying the ceiling is blue, the one person, they demonize that one person? That's what's happening. They're defaulting to the playbook.
Exactly.
They really don't know how to handle Trump. So it's like, we'll just do this. We'll just do this. We'll just do what we've always done. We'll just make him seem like a bad guy.
Right, now, the question is, how are they going to react if suddenly a story starts to spread throughout the web? That John McCain, because it's right there, you can Google it right now on veteranstoday.com. Just Google it, like I said. And what if that thing starts to spread?
Well, look what happened the Swift voters during Kerry. Look at that. It started to spread.
Right, so what are they going to say if the guy they just freshly defended, and every politician who lined up to put their arm around John McCain and say, he's our hero, did they know or didn't they know?
Right.
It's going to start, and then the 9/11 theology, they're the only ones that came up with this, the minute the towers are being hit, the only one that could have done this is Osama bin Laden. The only one, and then, we didn't learn that there were 3 September 11th attacks on American soil by the British, and then there were cults that worship the bloody digits 911.
That's true.
Because it's not just the Mormons, it's also Skull and Bones.
Right. And what's interesting, too, is that somebody like Donald Trump, I know sometimes he speaks in general terms, but he's a larger picture kind of guy. Details he tends to leave to other people. I think he has plenty of people. Chuck Yeager just put a great piece out on Twitter and Facebook about many of the different details of Trump's plan. And all you got to do is a little bit of research and homework, and you can find out exactly what they are. And they're on Trump's side anyway. But nobody's following this. Nobody's paying attention to this, except, of course, the people who support Trump. So it's defaulting to that consensus of science. Get as many people to believe whatever the consensus is, and then it becomes science. Whereas there are individuals who are saying, well, no, if you just look at what Donald Trump is saying and what his plans are, oh, you're for that Donald Trump guy. Again, you keep hitting that wall of these detractors and these, what I call guffaws. Oh, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to vote for Trump. What are you, crazy? Believe me, I have clients that have said to me, you're nuts. You think Donald Trump, what? And they really don't know what they're talking about because they keep spitting out what they hear on the 6 o'clock news every single night. So again, it's the consensus of science thing. And Paul Ryan, as soon as I started to watch the news, well, Paul Ryan says he's not interested in the speakership. Remember when that was the headlines?
Yeah.
The minute I heard that, I was like, yeah, right. I mean, I guffawed at the TV. I was like, oh, yeah, right. He's not interested. I was like, this is political theater, is what it is.
Yeah.
They're going to play the game. They're going to let it hang for a little while to give the media something to talk about for a week. Basically, is what it is. And I kept watching. You could go to CNN, MSNBC, any station. You could go to anyone, and they were all talking about this for a week. And I thought to myself, come Monday, he's going to throw his hat in. Sure enough, Monday, the next week, he was like, all right, I'm going to, do we have the votes? Okay. And it's like, oh God, it's sometimes it's like, really, America, you're that stupid, that you're actually, will he run? I don't know. Well, will he do it? I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? It's like, don't worry about it. He is going to. Well, what makes you say that? Is because it's political theater.
Well, he might.
Just watch.
He might want to run for president one day. I mean, everybody knows you can't go from being Speaker of the House to being president. Oh, I get it.
Well, why not? I mean, come on. Why not?
The biggest thing that worries me about him is he's a Romney man.
I know. Well, he's a rhino anyway, right?
He's a rhino, but he apparently switched his positions quite extensively when he became under the name of Romney, and I just don't like that. So that's why I'm calling out to your listeners, your viewers, to basically do something.
Sure.
You know, like I cracked the culture war. Like I don't know how much more I can do. I got some ideas. I have some ideas though, believe me, but we need people to start talking, because if we can get the word out, just even if it's not about John McCain, if it's just about Mitt Romney, look what you get, because Mitt Romney is being lined up to be the one to knock Donald Trump out of the race.
Well, never mind McCain and Romney. I mean, that passed his prologue. Let's look at some of the other candidates that are out there now. I mean, Christie, Rubio, even Cruz, Senator Rand Paul. Cruz seems to have a decent voting record. I've looked into a little bit of that. He has compromised on a few various key legislation. Rubio's fallen into line with the mainstream Republicans. Rand Paul falls into line with the mainstream Republicans. I think this is why you're seeing the year of the outsider. The Trump, the Carson, and I know we had misgivings about Fiorina, but still, those top three right there, they're all outsiders.
True. In my audios, I do single out Chris Christie in particular, and because I'm a very strong believer that 9/11 was known beforehand, which if you look at the video feed of George W. Bush, when the first tower was hit, what are you going to see? You're going to see the micro expression of a grin. He grins. He does grin, ear to ear, but then he immediately follows that with what I think is a phallic symbol.
Yeah, he does. He does. Right.
And he was down in Sarasota, Florida, by chance.
Right. He was reading to a bunch of kids in the school.
Yeah, by chance, my niece's husband was his waiter, so that's the only reason I knew. Like, oh, he was in Sarasota, Florida, at a famous tennis club, having a wonderful dinner. But I did some research. He was not playing tennis. He was not. It was business outside of Washington. Mm-hmm. Because in Washington, you can't control your schedule. Somebody walks in and it's the Speaker of the House, and you got to let them in or whatever. You can't just lock yourself in a closet.
Sure.
So he had to get out of Dodge to do what I believe was pre-9/11 paperwork. So when do you think he appointed Chris Christie to become
the prosecutor?
September the 10th. So, see, I only know that because Chris Christie kind of wears that as a badge of
He does.
September the 10th. So I thought, because then I already knew Bush was down there doing pre-9/11 planning. So, and that's what made me realize they needed a bulwark in New Jersey, because there's a lot more there than the meets the eye. If there's going to be something that important, some event that significant. As you know, there were people that made money on the airlines, American Airlines, United Airlines. They knew it was going to happen. And what you may not know is the property, the World Trade Center towers,
the property
was owned by the New Jersey Port Authority, right? Except it was bought 10 weeks prior. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Yeah, Silverstein Properties got ownership of the World Trade Center. It's a crown jewel owned by the taxpayers in New Jersey. And it was plucked right out of their hands 10 weeks prior to the 9/11 attack.
Right.
So then there was some guy at Silverstein Properties.
You almost wonder if it was an insurance job.
Oh, it's an insurance fraud.
Right.
On an extra, even in
Oh,
my,
we just bought the building, set it on fire.
well, in my article, I do say, please forward this to the New Jersey State Police and every insurance company that paid a dime. It's a multi-billion-dollar payoff. They went to this guy, Silverstein Properties. Yeah, they're building a nice building. If somebody gave me $5 billion, I can guarantee you, I could build that.
Is it Silverstein who owns the land still? Did they, the new tower that's up there now?
That I haven't followed through, but I do know that there was a Silverstein Properties that took ownership
Prior to.
10 weeks prior.
10
So
weeks prior.
I believe one of the reasons that Chris Christie got that job on September the 10th is very important for George Bush. It was a bulwark against any kind of suspicion that this could be an inside job, an insurance fraud of an extraordinary caliber.
Sure.
And that's why he absolutely should not be president. And of course, that's one reason Chris Christie's trying to pull us into World War III. He's in that kind of we got to be tough on the Russians when meanwhile Vladimir Putin would be a much better president right now than Obama.
Actually, I say let the Russians take over the Middle East. Let them do it. Let them have it. Let them have it. They're doing a great job bombing everything. Rob, I want to thank you so much.
Okay.
I mean, you were right. We only covered so much. There's a whole bunch of great stuff. Again, it's Saving America the Beautiful, savingatb.com. And again, I'll put all the sites up on my Facebook page, the Meat and Potatoes page, and it'll be on the video itself, in the highlights up there. And Rob, again, thank you so much for coming on to the show.
Thank you very much.
Very good.